So we're with Vilhelm von Ehrenheim from QA Tech, one of the three co-founders. And what I'd love for you to start by telling us is uh, you uh, you had a long background in tech before this. Just give us a little bit of what you enjoyed in your background and trace the story of how you got to here, where you are today.
Cool. Thank you for having me first. Yeah. Um, it all started like quite some time ago. I was actually studying physics, and then I read a book about quants and economics and stuff, and I was really into um, statistics and algorithms and things at that time. So
Yeah.
it felt like a good fit. But then there wasn't really any quant jobs in Sweden. But then I found an inroad to Klarna, so I joined Klarna, which is like somewhat similar. It's in fintech, and then quickly things were moving more and more into machine learning. So then that was something that I picked up early. That was very close to this statistics and algorithm kind of interest that I had. And then uh, I was part of building up the credit and fraud risk scoring engines at Klarna in the pretty early days there. And that was a lot of fun. And then I was also introduced to working in a pretty kind of tech forward company where there was a lot of really talented engineers that you could learn a lot from, and that also kind of set me more and more towards this kind of tech focus in
I'm
general.
curious just to probe a couple of things. So the learning theme is already emerging, right? That there are these other really
Yeah,
capable engineers, and you're excited to learn from them. And you said, I think, so. I picked up machine learning. um, just paint that picture. How are you doing that learning to pick up machine learning? How are you learning from others? Were you teaching them as well?
it's very interesting. I think especially when you start in a setting where like the problem is somewhat defined, you know kind of what you want to solve, but it's but there's a lot of old legacy ideas and things within credit scoring. If you read about credit scoring in general, it's like super old scorecard based approaches, and you read that and you're like, oh my god, there must be a much better way to do this. So that like sparks curiosity, and I think when you find those kind of moments where uh, you also want to learn more about the specific field and kind of dig deeper into what machine learning could offer, and you have a nice problem that is well defined that you would like to work on, then it's a really good kind of ground to learn and pick up things, I think.
Yeah, I love that. So you've got a sort of juicy enough, complex enough problem,
Mm,
which you know something about, but there's a lot of understanding left to do.
yeah.
And there's a curiosity driving you with a sense of like, I know it could be better than this.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I think is super important as well is that it's very easy to get kind of stuck on doing POCs and experiments when you start with like data science and machine learning. And I think where I was lucky there was that it was a very kind of business critical central problem.
Yeah.
Uh, and that makes it so much easier because then you have the potential to kind of scale that and actually get resources to solve the problem and get time and effort to kind of be able to spend the effort in order to actually solve it and make something good, because it has a large impact. If you're stuck in this kind of POC land, it can be hard to actually get to complete a full project like and get something into production. And there's a huge kind of side of things on the production side as well, which is super important to learn and kind of pick up from as well. So
Yeah, I can already see how just that last part might have been the bridge to QA tech and what you're building
yeah,
today.
totally.
But keep telling us the journey.
Yeah,
It's been a
yeah,
while
yeah.
asking you
I,
about
I
this.
spent quite a few years at Klarna, and then I was kind of curious to find something new, and then I was actually approached by a recruiter to join EQT and start building what they called Mother Brain, and just the name kind of sparked my interest, I think, initially. And then um, I didn't know so much about EQT more than it was a large private equity investor, and they had this ventures fund. Um, but I was also kind of starting to get a little bit bored with modeling how people cannot pay. It was like a somewhat sad thing to model, right? So the promise of starting to model what makes a startup interesting was very kind of it spoke a lot to me. So that's how I kind of got interested in that opportunity, and then joining something that was completely new and they hadn't really solved it in any way. We were a very small team. We were just 3 people starting, and then starting to build something. That was a lot of fun.
Love it. So you worked there on the Mother Brain for a while, and that was the chapter that came before QA Tech.
Yeah, yeah. I spent 7 years at EQT actually, and uh, in there I learned a lot about like data, more advanced algorithms, and deep learning, and all of these things that we did to both model interesting patterns in startups and segment markets and all these things. And then uh, I was I, I always had this kind of dream that like when you're working and trying to kind of analyze startups, like eventually you would probably want to make your own, right? It's kind of it kind of comes natural. And I think there's definitely more people on the investment side that feels the same. I think when after a while you want to try your own wings.
Yeah,
Um, so I had that kind of idea and dream, and then I also when the Gen AI wave hit, we were already using large language models in production actually at EQT before some specific use cases, and then we're starting to look more into different kind of uh, solutions that we could do in order to leverage the power of these models. Uh, but it felt like it wasn't really kind of core, and I really wanted to do something much more uh, AI first in that sense.
yeah. Was that
So
from just like recognizing the potential and like you didn't want it to be a sort of add-on, you wanted it to be the product?
yeah, exactly. And that combining those two together, like I wanted to do something, and I wanted to build something more AI first, especially kind of focusing on the agent side of things, um, which is very exciting to me. I think it holds a lot of promise
Yeah.
in a lot of different fields.
Yeah, say more about that because there's so much potential, but what was it about the agent side of things that was
I
attractive?
think I think it kind of makes it possible for models to reason and behave more like a human, which I think is super interesting. And being able to take decisions not only in a controlled kind of small setting where we already did like automated decisions in Klarna, right? But focusing much more on this kind of open-ended problems where it's harder. There's like the input output is not super well defined, and multi-step kind of reasoning trajectories and all of these things is super interesting, I think. And uh, and it felt like that was kind of that had been available in the reinforcement learning kind of side of things for a while, but very slim still and pretty hard to make it work nicely. And suddenly these large language models comes along and makes it possible to do that in a new kind of way. It's I think super interesting. They have this kind of concept of world model internally, right, where they understand things about the world. They're trained on large sets of text, which makes it possible then to structure it in ways that they can take decisions.
Yeah. I want to hear so much more. Uh, so you have this growing interest in building a product and jumping into startup land. I want to come back to how your past understanding of the variables that influence startup success might be you might be
Yeah.
getting to leverage now. Uh, but then you told me previously, so somehow you came across a couple guys who are now your co-founders, and then you landed on QA Tech. So
Yeah,
we,
yeah. So we have my other two co-founders know each other since before. They used to work together at the several other companies in the past, and then they had this idea of it would be possible if it would be possible to kind of um, not only write. They started out with writing tests like and acceptance criteria for different things that they were building. They had a lot of struggles with it with QA testing in general on their last kind of gig, and then um, the question came then naturally: would it be possible to let AI actually try to kind of verify whether or not this actually works? And so we have a common friend, and he introduced us. I was this AI guy. They had this idea, and they're kind of very tech focused as well. And
you
then
were the AI guy who everybody who wants to build something is looking for.
yeah, I guess. Uh, I think it's so much easier to do things today than it was like a couple of years ago, though. Like now, I think you can get away with being a good programmer on a lot of things, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we kind of met at Patrick's apartment and started hacking on a solution together. I felt really good, and um, it kind of ticked a lot of these kind of boxes for me. Like something new, interesting, something kind of more agentic,
Yeah.
or at least having the possibility to be something agentic. And then um, we had a lot of fun. So then we decided to kind of join forces and start QA Tech. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And so tell us about you referenced it a little bit. What are you solving for? What is the product? If you want to pull it up and give us like a quick 1 or 2 minute demo,
Sure.
you can do that too.
So the basic idea is essentially that we build an agent that can control things on a web page and do different things, similar to what a user does. And then we package this for testing. So essentially, building synthetic users or something like that to test your web pages or your web applications before actually releasing it to real customers. And that like testing things before you release it to production, it's not a new thing. That's been around for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
But it's usually a very cumbersome process. It takes both very costly, and it takes a lot of time and effort from the engineering teams as well to handle. So being able to offload some of that to AI has a lot of promise. Typically, traditionally, you have two different kinds of QA testing. You have the manual ones, which is like a person clicking around and trying to break the system, essentially, right? And verifying that it works to do different things, like maybe placing a purchase or sending an invoice or booking a plane ticket or whatever. And then the other side is to do automated scripting. Um, that's typically done in a very hard-coded fashion. So you have a script that essentially has the capability to execute commands on the page, but then you would like load the page, wait 300 milliseconds, click on this identifier, wait, la la, and that becomes very brittle. As soon as something changes on the page, you usually have to do a lot of updates and work on getting all of those scripts to work again. And the more scripts you have, the more work it is. And then you essentially develop this kind of parallel code base of a lot of things that should just ensure that things are working. But you have to maintain that just as much as you do the normal thing, which of course slows down the process of developing new features.
Right. So it's like you're not only maintaining your code base, you also have to maintain the ways that you're testing to see if your code base will actually work the way that you're hoping it will.
Yeah.
And with QA tech, you are removing the need for that
We're
large.
removing the need for that much. Yeah, exactly. Because um, when an AI looks at the page and behaves more like a user, you don't necessarily need to tell it to wait 300 milliseconds or click this specific identifier. So if I change the color of the button or the name of it or remove the button and have another kind of selector or whatever, it's still kind of looking at the page and analyzing it more similar to what a
Yeah.
human does.
So
normally a person doesn't care if the button is black or blue. Like it doesn't really
right.
matter, right? Yeah.
So you're saving engineers an enormous amount of time, and I imagine finding more bugs as well more quickly.
Yes.
What
Yes.
what kind of what kind of stats do you have on those savings and the
So we have a one pretty large customer that reduced their QA spend with 80%, which
say
is
say it one more time? They reduced their
their spend on quality assurance with 80%.
by 80%. So
Yeah,
put
it's
that
pretty crazy.
put that in like a it's going to be different for different size customers, but if
Yes, of
somebody's
course.
using your product, um, for a I don't know for a 10-person engineering team, obviously it's still
Yeah,
vary for a 10
yeah.
person engineering team. How much time are they going to save each week on QA?
So first of all, it very much depends on how much time and effort they spend on QA in the first place. Like, but in general, I would say what we really reduce is the amount of time it takes to actually like test a new thing that you have developed. So instead of having to then kind of write the scripts and all of these things, even if you have AI assisted coding today that can make it a lot faster, you still have to put a lot of effort into that. And then what you do with us is that you just write like a free text description. We even scan the pages and suggest things that pop up that are new that you could potentially want to test. And then the agent essentially just runs it through. You could just look over the trace of how the agent reasoned and what it did, and you can see screenshots and a video recording of everything. And then if it looks good, you could just kind of release the tests into your test suite, and then it would be part of making sure that it works every time you do deploy.
Wow. Wow. Uh, Amazing. And when we spoke previously, you told me that this was not a product that you started building and then released the next week or the next month. Uh,
No, it always takes time. I think it took a little bit longer than we expected. I think in regards to a few different things, and first of all, even if it was possible for us when we started to build an agent that could do some simpler things on the page, it wasn't really enough to actually use as a full kind of QA solution, right? Like
yeah,
if you could log in and accept cookies, which was like the first things we managed to do, then that's all great, but that's maybe not the core that you would like to make sure that it works. Like login is of course important,
yeah,
but so there was a lot of things that we first had to kind of improve in order to make the agent good enough. And I think building alongside of this tremendous evolution in AI in general has made it more and more easy to accomplish. I think today our agent is remarkably good, I think, but without having the larger evolution of AI things to
yeah.
lean on, I think it wouldn't really have been possible for us.
Um, and when did you realize that your product was ready, that it reached a maturity level that you could deploy it? Were you working with design partners that you? Uh,
Yeah, so we had a group of like beta testers early that we kind of bounced things with and got feedback from. Um, that helped a lot in understanding what was important to focus on. We got the agent a lot better, and it felt like we thought we were kind of at this level where it should work for most things, but then it was a lot slower than it is today. And then we got a lot of feedback on it being too slow, like, oh, it takes a very long time to run. Yeah. Which is of course maybe still faster than like outsourcing a QA and kind of sending things over and getting the response the next day. But if you're sitting there and looking at the agent and it takes a long time, then that was still somewhat of a blocker. I think there's still, of course, improvements to be made on that end as well. We could definitely run even faster, but our own test suite now runs in somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, which is a lot of tests. So I think compared to having people doing that, it's a lot faster.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Um, that's
that
amazing.
that those things I think were like when we saw, and I think you definitely also saw an uptake in interest from when you speak to a new potential customer and you show them the product, where you when you realize that they think like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I really want to try this. Like that was like an important kind of breaking point in when we saw that the market really needs something like this, and they're going to be happy to try it, I think.
Love it. Um, do you want to, I don't know if it's conducive to this environment. Do you want to screen share and just show us what
I
it looks
can
like, how somebody might use it?
let's do it.
All right, so we're going into the demo environment to see what does it look like when you actually
Yeah, exactly. So
run it.
when I click run tests here, it would start a full run. So here we have something started. Here's the dependency tree of things. So it starts with running the login because all of the other tests here depend on login. Um, you could also see it as a list like this. There are all the 10 tests that are running.
Wow.
And if we go into this, oh, it was already completed. If we go back to kind of a test that's edit the collection, you would see it kind of thinking, then it figures out that it should navigate to the collections page, and then thinking again, you see that it clicks here.
This is like seeing ChatGPT in reasoning mode,
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar.
but seeing it
And then
play out with.
we don't actually stream the thinking here because there are so many different steps that happens before it actually kind of has some output. But you know, kind of, I need to update the description text, blah blah blah, and then it kind of fills in things here as it goes along.
Then show us again what the output looks like once this.
Once this is completed, we can look at the succeeded one. Then you get this kind of video recording of the steps, and you also have this kind of free text where it analyzes whether or not it has succeeded with its goal. So you have this: the test scale will also add an organization to a collection, and the expected result was to see the organization added in the selected collection. The image and markdown shown that the QA tech was successfully added to the artificial intelligence company's collection, fulfilling the test goal. So it's very kind of high level analysis where it's also kind of comparing them to the expected result and making sure that it has done the steps that it needs to in order to succeed with the goal.
Wow. I feel like my wife would like a version of this for me. Like, can I test how my husband's going to move through the kitchen? And if the simulated user runs into a problem in comparison to my expected result, yeah, here's what I could change to make it easier for him to navigate that environment.
Yeah, I think there's so much potential also, not only on this kind of quality side of things, but also from a user experience side of things, like having different kinds of AI users testing your platform and making sure that it's easy to understand and that it's easy to do the things that you would like to be
Yeah.
easy to do, right? Like it's
Yeah.
uh, when it comes to user experience design, it's not super easy either, and there's not much testing in general apart from
Yeah.
testing on real kind of users or user groups. So having some
Yeah.
kind of simulation there would be super cool as well.
Yeah, it strikes me as really inspiring because um, per what you were saying earlier, we know that when we release into the wild, uh,
Yeah,
we're going to get much more clarity much faster by seeing actual interactions instead of trying to perfect the design up front. And so you're giving people the ability to see how uh, a user might interact, and then based on that, very quickly iterate.
yeah, exactly. Here you also see like when it's trying to delete something here, it's trying to click delete. Nothing really happens when it clicks the button because that's not implemented in this test intentionally in this case, so that we can test whether or not it actually kind of finds bugs as well.
Yeah.
But here then you could see that reasoning as well. Like it's trying to do the deletion. The button remained visible and clickable, suggesting that the delete functionality is non-functional.
Right. Right. Are there any other aspects of the test environment that you want to show off?
Um, we also have this concept of test plans, which is essentially a way for you to be able to run like a smaller set of things. So tests. Uh, And here you can add different test cases. So like say, for example, that I only want to run like a subset of this. I want to run the login and this search thing, and I want to run that like uh, every time. Then it's possible to run this. We also have a new kind of feature coming up pretty soon where you can also select more details in regards to the environment that the test is run in. Like, do you want to have it on a mobile viewport? Do you want to run with a specific user agents or language settings or something like that, which then you can run in different, um, the same kind of set of tests, but for different kinds of setups as well,
Right.
which is super useful. Yeah.
And actually, what you're sharing reminds me uh, of managers delegating to other humans too.
Mm,
You have a new colleague, a new direct report. You're thrilled to have somebody taking some work off your hands that you used to do manually, you used to do yourself. But often there's this initial, exactly as you put it, how
mm,
much can I trust them?
yeah.
And like how much do I have to keep my fingers involved in this project?
I think that's very spot on. It's a common problem in general in leadership, right? Like you have the possibility to delegate things, but you also need to make sure that they actually happen and how they happen, and trust your employees. And like there's a lot of different aspects to it that is super interesting. I think we'll see more and more of that kind of stuff coming with AI tooling as well. I think agents are definitely going to be a thing. Like people are like it makes so much sense to be able to automate things. And RPA has been around for a long time, but it's been very hard to actually get it to work nicely. And now I think we're at this point where it's going to be possible to automate a lot of different
Yeah,
workflows.
yeah,
And I don't think necessarily it will replace that many people. It's more that it's going to be like less need to spend time on things that used to be very time consuming and manual. And being able to do things in a more efficient manner makes it also possible to do more things instead,
yeah,
and think more about like development and improvements rather than just kind of making sure that you keep your head over the surface.
yeah. Yeah, what stands out to me that you just said is like essentially uh, the tasks that feel robotic that we've long been doing, we can actually replace with robots.
Yeah.
We can replace with agents. And the tasks that don't feel robotic, thinking about what to develop, thinking about what we want to bring into being,
Mm,
we have more space and time to do.
to do, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that kind of that's a very exciting future ahead, I think, in that regard, because that
yeah,
will make it possible to be much more creative in what we do and what we
yeah.
create and how we kind of actually conduct
And
things.
it connects to me to, when I work with managers or founders, especially as they're scaling, to start delegating more. There
Mm,
is this big trap that we were just referencing of like, okay, I'll delegate, but I'm like still a little bit involved in this. I'm a little bit involved in this. My attention is still split in many different places. And then
mm,
when those people get really competent colleagues, it becomes easier to trust. Um, and when they become more competent leaders and know how to delegate,
mm.
um, then there's another level. So it's sort of both. And I
It's
see the
it's very
parallel here
interesting.
of like the more competent the agents become, the more I can trust that, oh, there's less, maybe nothing that I have to do to check on it.
Mm,
And the better that I get in managing the agents, the better I get in interacting with AI. Likewise, I know how uh, to delegate a task, to make a request, a prompt, and then I can step back and let it do its work.
yeah, yeah, it's going to be super interesting, I think. Uh, and in regards to startup and scaling, I think that's always a problem, right? Like you start out with a super small team, maybe just a few founders. You're just building things and being very hands on.
Yeah,
And then like suddenly the team grows and you're kind of becoming more and more of a manager that needs to manage the different teams and figure out how to kind of to be more efficient, because you can't just scale without delegating. And people are speaking about like potential one-man unicorns now, right? Where that could potentially happen now
Yeah.
with the help of AI. And but it's the same thing. Then you will have to kind of delegate to different AIs and
Yeah.
kind of manage all of that
And I'm
and make
curious to
sure that
hear your
happens.
experience at QA Tech with this. So first it was just you and your two co-founders, and I'd love to hear more about the dynamic with them. But then, yeah, you've built a team. How big's the whole team now?
We're 12.
12. Okay. Um,
Yeah, so
and
we had a few engineers that joined pretty early actually, and then yeah, as we have grown, I think we're at the stage now where it kind of makes sense to start splitting the teams up a little bit.
yeah.
So I think
What are
when you're
the
when
what are the signals or the symptoms, if you will, that are indicating it's time to start
I,
differentiating?
I think there are several things, but in general, they like when as you grow the team a bit, you would see that people focus on slightly different areas.
Hmm.
And then when you have meetings about like stand-ups and things and talking about what your priorities, there will be more and more time where it doesn't really make sense for some of those people to listen to the other people, because they're kind of, there will be a lot of dead time where you're just kind of talking about details about a project that they will not really touch at all. Of course, it's always good with communication, so it's important to kind of cross-pollinate in some regard in what's happening and what's the priorities for the larger kind of organization. But that, I think that definitely happens. And my experience is that it happens quite early. Like when you're more than like 5, 6 people, it starts being more and more like that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's because people tend to focus on different things. You don't work on the exact same things,
Yeah.
all of you. Yeah.
And tell me, and I read in your description, I think in your LinkedIn profile, you said, my mission is to build awesome teams that build awesome AI systems together,
Yeah.
which so resonates with me. So tell me what does that look like concretely at QA Tech? And I know from my experience, it's rarely ever as clean as we would like it to be theoretically.
No.
Tell us
No.
how how you've come to build an awesome team, what the challenges were that you've already overcome, what the challenges that are that you're navigating right now at this stage.
I think um, like in my earlier career, I've always been struggling with the kind of keeping priorities aligned within the team, and especially when it comes to different kinds of functions. So you have like a product function, you have a like tech function, and you have like sales or whatever, and then you have and this kind of having this communication between is always hard because you don't necessarily have the understanding and the capability of the tech in the product team, and you don't have the product kind of capabilities in the tech team, and like all of these things. Uh, so navigating that and kind of balancing it is very hard. I think what we were kind of a little bit lucky on that side because we have like all the three founders are very technical and kind of have the the some kind of parts of the different stack together, and then that makes it so much easier to build teams that are very aligned, because if product and tech are very kind of tightly coupled, then it's easy to understand what to build and how to kind of bring value to your customers, but also like what's possible to build and how you could and what to spend time on. Like if you just give a task to an engineer, especially with an ML engineer, I think would be kind of stuck in optimizing things and making it run faster or making your model better and better. And but that might not be what's the most important for your end customers. And having the product perspective is super important in order to understand what to spend time on and what actually brings value.
Yeah.
So
Will you
having
give
this
an
kind of
example of that from QA Tech in a way
so
where yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think there's always this kind of very interesting when you're building alongside a very kind of fast improvements in the kind of AI market and side of things, that then you have this kind of sunk cost of projects where you kind of might have to spend a lot of time on kind of making a smaller model be kind of doing something that might be replaced in a few months time. And I
Yeah.
think it's still important in order to be able to kind of build a good product and and kind of follow along as the evolution is happening. But then, like, if you were to just kind of focus on the ML side of things, then you would be stuck on kind of improving that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, when you get it good enough so that you can start getting value from it in like an 80/20 kind of mindset, right? To and release that to customers, and they play around with it, and you kind of get a little bit more understanding, and then suddenly something new comes along, and you kind of can optimize things or remove it and make it faster for them instead. I think that's a super interesting kind of side of things where, like, if it were only to look at from an ML perspective, we would still be building on this whole model that we've already thrown out, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
so I think that kind of puts this kind of evolution also puts that even more kind of upfront, that you need to be very on your much more on your toes and kind of listen to both what's available on the market, but also what could potentially actually change the experience for users and have an impact.
Yeah. And as a founder and chief AI officer, how are you? How do you get your engineers to be comfortable releasing at 80%, or is it screw comfort? This is when we're going, when we're shipping.
Yeah, I try to kind of talk closely about what kind of impact you're bringing, and focusing on impact goals. So not necessarily kind of saying that, oh, the model should be at this level of performance, but rather like we would like to do this so that we can open up this function and user can try it, and then we will learn more and have some kind of impact on their actual experience.
Yeah.
So I think trying to keep that as kind of close to mind as possible for the team. And we
Yeah.
structure it in general in very, very small kind of projects with some specific goals that should kind of tie into what's needed from the product side, and then focus on the kind of delivering that fast. And if we want to improve it, then we kind of structure that as a new product so that we can kind of follow on and build things in a quick fashion. I'm not sure if it's the best way to do it, but it's definitely an interesting way, I think.
Yeah. When you say small projects, how small? Sort of like what's the mean time frame?
I think 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah. Great. Um, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. We were talking about learning, and obviously, um, especially in a rapidly growing startup, learning is the name of the game. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you do that as a team, and how you individually and maybe as a team are using AI to deepen, accelerate, fuel learning.
Yeah. So learning is super important, and I think that's long been a very kind of core driver for me. Um, I think what we normally do is that we try to share different findings that we have across the team. So having some kind of lunch session or breakfast session where you kind of explain some findings and things that you have tried or found, and then
And do you do that systematically, or is it when somebody's got something they initiate?
I think we would love to do it systematically, but we're not really there yet. I think it's good to have that systematically because it's easy that it get. Otherwise, it's easy that you drop the ball for a few weeks and then you're gonna come back.
Yeah.
So it's usually good. But uh, yeah, those things I think are super important. And then also when we're trying new tools or reading about things, we're sharing a lot on Slack and keeping channels as open as possible. And I think that definitely helps as well. So it's easy to kind of understand, oh, this new thing has come out. Have you seen it? And then get a conversation started about it. I think it's super good. Um, what else do we do? When you're such a small team, it's also easier in a way because you meet everybody all the time, and it's kind of
Yeah.
it's good to it's so easy to speak about something that you have recently read about and kind of dig a little
Yeah.
bit deeper into it.
Let me ask you one or two more questions. When you were working on Mother Brain at EQT, you mentioned, like, after so much time analyzing what what factors predict successful startups, you were keen to jump in the game and try your own hand at it. What assumptions did you have based on that experience that were validated, that have played out, and what ones have been overturned?
Well, I think first of all, like focusing on like startup success prediction, it tends to be very, especially in the early stages, it tends to be a lot about the team. So you of course also like usage metrics and things, but that usually comes a little bit later when you actually have some customers and traffic and all of these things to analyze, right? So so uh, and I think that's definitely validated. I think like building a really strong team early is super important, and having the capability to ship things fast with high quality, which is not super easy to do, right? So I think that's definitely validated, and I think having this high paced kind of mindset that most startups need to have is also why startups are able to kind of disrupt things and build new interesting things that the market hasn't seen before. So that's because you're fighting against the clock in a different way than you do in a larger organization. That's definitely validated. Uh, some of the things that I think are different is there's there's so much more to it than just building like a nice product, right? Like I think your go-to-market strategies and all of these different things are super important for you to be able to actually have a product that somebody wants to buy. Um, and I think that's definitely a super important kind of aspect from the investor side, but maybe not so much on the quantitative kind of investor side. You're mostly focusing on kind of collecting data and understanding different things about the product and what people think about it, you know, like all of these things.
Yeah,
And I think uh, also when you're starting out yourself, you're just kind of left alone in a sense. You don't really have that much to lean back on. So apart from maybe your early investors, and I think that's definitely been a little bit more challenging than I thought it would be. I think
the
uh,
go-to-market side.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. I think it's partly because we had to shift a little bit as well, like which is of course also a common thing in the startup that you have to kind of do some pivots. But I think we were focusing much more on a product-led strategy or originally, which felt like a natural kind of way to package this. Uh, and I think you're a little bit biased as an engineer because you're thinking of it in those kinds of terms, right? Like I like tools,
yeah,
I want to try tools, and but when it comes to QA, it tends to be much more structured in organizations, and especially when you have like a larger team and you're working in a much more uh, structured manner around like quality and making sure that your product is working as it should. It leads itself to be a little bit more kind of sales led because you
yeah,
need to speak to the right people to get a decision and
yeah,
get it into. It's not enough that an engineer tried it over the weekend, right? And
yeah,
also, even if it's super easy to get started and try things, uh, the experience is not great if you do it yourself. I think because you kind of you go in there and you're like if you just want to try a tool as a developer, you wouldn't use your real environment, right? Like you would use something else, and then
yeah,
people try like, oh, I'm gonna put in YouTube, and then the agent gets blocked by their bot prevention and stuff like that. You need to have like some of these measures in place
yeah,
for for it to make sense. And also, it's much more interesting to see it on your actual environment that you care about and you want to make sure it works and how
yeah,
your development flows work. And so I
yeah,
think it works a little bit better in that side, which is something that we had to kind of discover as we were
yeah.
working.
Let me ask you one final question for now. If people who watch and listen to this want to investigate QA tech, want to use the product, what's the best way for them to try it out, to reach out?
So it is possible to reach out via our webpage, qa.tech. We have a kind of free trial that you can try out. I highly recommend trying it on your actual staging environment, like I said, or some toy example of it, and then of course reaching out to us there and book a call, and we can kind of start working with you together and help you get started. That's usually the best experience.
Amazing. All right. Wilhelm, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.